If you're joining today's session, it's because climate is a topic close to your heart. Climate change has become a priority for so many of us on a daily basis, influencing the way we live, the way we work, and make decisions. From the energy we use to the food we consume, addressing climate challenges has become an essential part of our day-to-day life and an essential part also of building a more sustainable and resilient future. Climate change also remains one of the core priorities of the European Commission. So many colleagues on different DGs are working on this topic, from the European Green Deal to the EU mission on adaptation and the shared goal for Europe to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And to get there, data plays an essential role. It helps us first understand what is happening, help us take timely decisions, track progress, and ensure accountability. And first and foremost, support innovation and climate solutions that make a real impact. And with the 30th Conference of the Partners, the largest global UN event for discussions and negotiations taking place next week on climate change, the need for evidence-based action and clear communication is more important than ever. So today we will explore data and how data can support meaningful climate action, enable real-world solutions, and help us communicate urgency through visual storytelling. And hopefully I'm not doing that alone. We're having our two experts in this field that will provide us with further information on their work. Moving on to some housekeeping rules, whoever has joined us in the past is already familiar with this. The webinar is being recorded, and the slides and the recording will be shared afterwards with you via a recap mail. It will be shared with you 4 or 5 days after the event, and it will be also published on the data.europa Academy. For any questions, please use the chat as you've already been doing. We will ask them during the Q&A session. And as always, in the end of the session, please reserve 3 minutes to complete our short feedback survey. It really helps us to improve our content and bring to you webinars that you enjoy. And now, I would like to introduce our 2 speakers for today. First, we have Renato Berrino Malaccorto. Renato is a research manager at the Open Data Charter, where he leads policy and data initiatives with a strong focus on data rights and their link to human rights. He previously worked in open government and innovation roles in Buenos Aires and as a consultant for international public sector organizations. Renato is a lawyer specialized in international public law and human rights with a master's degree in management and public administration from Cadiz University. Secondly, we have with us Karim Douieb. Karim is a data visualization expert and co-founder of Jetpack.AI. Karim transforms complex issues like climate change and social inequalities into engaging visual stories. His work shows how design and interactivity can make climate urgency visible and relatable for everyone. Thanks to both of you for being today with us. Here's what to expect today. We already started with a short introduction. Then I will give the floor to Renato, where he will present his presentation on publishing climate data and unlocking public value through innovation challenges. Then Karim will take the stage, where he will present emotion in data, visualizing climate change. And we will finish with a Q&A session where your questions will be answered. So without further ado, Renato, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be sharing this space. I have attended many webinars in the past, so it's great to be sharing our experience now. So I'm going to go straight to the presentation so that we can do a good time management. I work in the Open Data Charter, that is a global civil society organization. We are turning 10 years old this year. And nowadays we have more than 170 governments and civil society organizations that have adopted and endorsed the charter. we were actually born as a charter and then we become an organization. And we work implementing projects and also conducting research and policy evidence for our network. One of our core topics is climate action. We are working really hard on that agenda. We have been working on that for many years. So I'm going to share a little bit of the experience and the projects that we have and an interesting innovation challenge that we conducted, trying to understand the impact and underutilization of open data climate. So these are, as I told you, we were born as a charter. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this because you're already familiarized with open data, but these are the 6 principles of the open data charter. So the governments and the organizations that join the network are endorsing and adopting these principles. We talk about open data by default, and when we do that, we always talk about this in dialogue with, of course, data privacy. We said that information should be published in a timely and comprehensive way, updated, and with all the information, not only the data, but also the metadata, the catalogs, and all the information around the data. That the data should be accessible and usable for everyone, comparable and interoperable with different standards. And also, there are 2 principles that we added when we started. One of them is data for improved governance and citizen engagement. When we talk about improved governance, we talk about the part of open government and open data that is not usually seen, and it has to do on how the internal processes in the agencies and the governments are working better because you have an updated periodicity, you have clear links and clear people working on the topic. So it turns out in better public policies and better delivery of public services. And for citizen engagement, because we think that when we are opening information in open data formats, we can encourage the feedback from the audience, and different sectors like academia, civil society organizations, journalists can work with that data, and the information flows in a bi-directional way. And also, our last principle is for inclusive development and innovation, and it has to do with the purpose of the publication of the data. We believe that it should be useful for addressing global challenges like this one, the action through climate change. So, and this is just a super quick information on the way we work. We work with the data impact framework, and we really try to address the work with data in different moments, from data production to action to the publication, and also the response mechanism of the reuse. And we have reshaped our strategy. We keep talking about opening by default, but also we talk about opening by with a purpose, so that the information is really, we know what we're doing and the information is useful for citizenship. So the main project I want to talk about with you today, it's our Open Up Guides that are our signature tools. We have Open Up Guides in different topics. Our core topics have been, since the beginning, mainly public integrity and anti-corruption, but then we start working on climate action, agriculture, and land governance. And more recently, we are also working on gender and mainly focus on care economy and care tasks. So these are tools that are available in our website, both in GitHub and in Airtable. And there are tools that are meant to be used by governments to collect, manage, and release sectoral data in these specific topics to help them improve the data quality, the availability, and the accessibility of the data, and also to promote citizen engagement. In particular, when you see an open up guide that is available in our websites, you're going to see in each topic key data sets that should be open. We propose these data sets when we work with doing some benchmarking on the specific topic. For example, for climate change, we have been working seeing the Paris Agreement and the information that the Paris Agreement prescribes that the governments should be reporting. And also we work globally, but we have a really strong community in Latin America, so we work really close with the Escazú Agreement too on access to information for climate data. It also has ideas and international examples on how the data could be collected, stored, shared, and published. We also do a benchmarking in the guides of good data policies and frameworks in different governance frameworks in different countries of the world. We try to come with existing gaps or challenges that we already find in different parts of the world, and also use cases from real life examples. I'm sorry. So for us, when we came up with the Open Up Guidebook on climate change, we always, when we start to work with a specific topic in a guide, we share our expertise on open data, but we also associate ourselves with organizations that are working on the sectoral topic. So, for example, the Open Up Guide on Climate Change was created together with the World Resources Institute. And here, the challenge that when we started with this in 2018, the challenge that we detected it was that data related to climate was really varied according to different stakeholders. It was disaggregated in different agencies of the government. Um, Also, we saw that it was generated by different agencies like meteorological services, regional and urban planning, natural resources and park management, mapping agencies, management agencies. So we saw that, and we thought that we should find a standard to publish all the information. So this is what the Open Up Guide tries to help us with. So a little bit of the context. It was really born within some discussions in the Open Government Partnership, especially after the Paris Agreement. And there was like a renewed attention to transparency issues around climate impact and action, and how this opening of information could help us to tackle the challenges of climate change. And what we always say when we are applying the guide, it's a baseline, and it's an ideal, but sometimes it's not possible to open up all of that information. Sometimes the information is not even well produced. So we have a first challenge before thinking in opening it up. We have to think on how to collect it and how to clean all the information. It's a baseline. It's not a prescription on how the data should be generated and published, but it's a suggestion. And we always work, when we work with different countries, I'm going to tell you one successful case that is the case with Uruguay. When we work with different countries, we try to associate ourselves also with local civil society organizations that really understand the context and what can be done, and to really understand the dialogue that they have already been having with the government. So these are like the main topics. We propose 71 data sets according to the Paris Agreement, but I think that these are, I can mention these as the main topics, and it's also really associated with what the European Union mentions as high value data sets. We work mainly in emissions related data, agricultural data, land use, electricity, transport data, waste data, natural hazards, and climate finance data. Um, I know that after the webinar, the presentation is going to be shared, and also you can find all the links to all of the projects I'm mentioning in the presentation. So I'm going to skip a few slides so that we can do a good time management. But we found that it was easier to publish those kind of data sets, but there was still, even when we were successfully opening up the information, there was still some information that is challenging, and it's still missing, and it has mainly to do with the categories of social and economic data related to climate. So some things that we really needed to better understand the whole photograph was mainly demographic and socioeconomic and technological factors driving gas emissions and vulnerability to climate impacts, the adaptive capacity of different sectors of the economy and of society, and the impacts of climate change on marginalized groups and its effects on existing inequalities. So, and also we can't, once we open up the information, it's not always easy to find the effects of policies and programs that the government and together with different organizations and stakeholders are doing to work on the missions and climate preparedness. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the specific use cases. We implemented the guide on Uruguay and Chile, and also nowadays this year we're implementing it in 3 countries at the same time, in also in Panama and Panama, Chile, and Costa Rica. And we start the process with a data assessment. So 20 of the 72 data sets that we were proposing had already some degree of openness. We try to involve different ministries. Of course, always the open data or innovation office is like our best ally in this work. But we also need to involve the Ministry of Environment because they are the one responsible to report on the Paris Agreement. And as I was saying, I think that one of the biggest challenges when we talk about climate change related data is that the information is generally produced and disaggregated between different agencies of the government. You have the Ministry of Energy, you have the agencies that work with waste management, the agencies that work with water. So there's like a huge spread of the information. So that was really challenging. And in the implementation, we managed to open 29 new data sets. So it was quite successful. I know that it doesn't seem a lot, but the 72 data set is like the ideal case. And sometimes in just one implementation is really difficult because time constraint and resources constraints make it really difficult. So this was quite successful for us. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of what happened with this opening of information. I think one of the main lessons that we came up from here, it was understanding the demand side. Like we really involved different actors to understand the demand of the data, so we could prioritize and do our publication plans with with some prioritization of data, and we could set realistic expectations of publication. So I'm going directly to the use cases because I think it's the most interesting that I can share now. One of the main products that came up after we opened the information was this visualization that you're going to find the link in the presentation. It was a gas emissions viewer. It was made by the government itself, so that's really interesting, by the Innovation Office, but it's open. So they are using it. It's a tool that the Ministry of Environment is using it when they think in their climate change long-term strategy, but it's also open for citizenship. So different universities are also using it for research. And then we promoted an innovation challenge with the objective of promote the use of all these data sets that were open. And we really wanted to link the environment and climate change communities with those entrepreneurs and developers that were really linked to open data. So we do introductory sessions. We did a call for proposals for different people to present their projects. We did mentoring, and we also had seed funding to help them incubate and improve their projects. So the project that won this challenge, and this is also available online, and I'm going to share it. It was a project called Uruguay 2100, and it was a journalism project, and it used the gas emissions data sets. And what they did is a visualization trying to show how the Uruguay coast would look like in 100 years if the emissions stay being the same as today, if there's not a lower level of emissions. So it was a really interesting case used to generate awareness. It won our challenge, but then they keep growing the project, and it also won a Pulitzer on journalism. And there were other interesting initiatives that we came across, and we also helped during the innovation challenge. There was a project called Sea Lion that was focused on cyanobacteria, and it seeks to unify the scientific knowledge generated on the subject in Uruguay and analyze the available data to generate diagrams and disseminate it on different social media. There was another project really interesting about waste collection and recovery. They use data from Montevideo's, like from a local level, from Montevideo directly, about recyclable waste collection circuits and reception infrastructure, and they seek to create a map of waste generation in the city. So it was really interesting too. There was another project about a microsite about climate change trends that facilitates the visualization, comprehension, and understanding of the main indicators of climate change in Uruguay. And also another one about food production and how it impacts climate change. So we really try to, once we got to open the data sets, we really try to encourage the reuse. Sometimes it's a difficult part. I think it's the most challenging part when we are implementing this kind of projects, but we really try to find ways on how to understand the impact of the openness and how we can see how society are using it. So there are a few more examples and projects that we and platforms that we came across that I'm also, after this, I'm going to share it in the presentation, but this is really interesting. It's from the UN. It's a climate action tracker that uses open data to in a global way to understand the measures taken about the globally agreed Paris Agreement about the global warming. There's another super interesting organization we usually work with that is called OpenQA that has open data sets and maps related to the quality of air. And then, as I was telling you, nowadays we are working in Chile, Colombia, and Panama again. There are different specific platforms that they are using with open data and trying to systematize the information that they have, also trying to narrow down their long-term climate strategies in a visual way that can be more understandable for different stakeholders. And also for example, Chile has a really interesting case when they use open data sets from energy, and they generated a platform on how to visualize and how to understand the data that it's really, really oriented to energy. I'm not going to spend more time talking about these projects. You can find it in the slides, and also we can talk about this in the Q&A. But I wanted, before I end, to share just a few lessons, and then we can also continue talking about the learnings and the lessons. But we have also done research on this that we can also talk at the end. But we found that some learnings and some challenges. For example, we found that there's a little link nowadays between the climate action and open data communities. That's not always strong. So that's why we also generate this kind of spaces for both communities to cross lines and to start thinking in opportunities for focused collaboration. Also, as I was mentioning, and I think that I mentioned it a few times, but it was a huge challenge, the disaggregation of the data into multiple institutions at the time of data generation. That was a huge challenge to get different stakeholders and actors working together for publishing the data. Also, we found generally a low level of data publication in open formats when we start with doing the prioritization workshops and the diagnosis. There's always a low data publication in open format related to climate change. And also, for some communities, the climate change data can be highly technical when we work in the NDC or with an NDC or with the information that the Paris Agreement prescribes. Some kind of information can be highly technical, and sometimes it's even difficult for some data scientists to work with this kind of information. So we really encourage the collaboration between the different sectors. And I have more lessons and more things to share, but I think that it's okay for now, so I can manage the time well, and we have time at the end for the Q&A. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Renato. Indeed, we will have a chance to dive deeper into your points during the Q&A session. We have already received quite a few questions, interesting questions. And for now, let's continue with Karim and his presentation. Karim, feel free to share your screen. The floor is yours.
All right. So, hi, everyone. My name is Karim Douieb. I'm one of the co-founder of Jetpack.AI, a Brussels-based data science company focusing on the energy sector. And today I'll share a few projects and experiments that I've created around the year. Around one question, how can we visualize climate change using open data? in a way that is clear, credible, and more specifically engaging. So here are the few of the data sets I've been exploring and I'm gonna present to you. There's gonna be the global temperature anomalies, the tornado count, the city average climate temperature, and then the sea ice extent. So I'll go through each of them, explaining a bit of how I've created them and what was the intention behind it. So let's start with the first one, the global surface temperature anomalies. So what you can see there, it's a line chart showing the average anomaly throughout the years. An anomaly is defined as the difference between the temperature measured at a given year versus the long-term average. Usually, this average is a reference period of 30 years. So instead of showing the absolute temperature evolving, this shows how much warmer or cooler a given year was compared to what is considered normal. So this data set is one of the most fundamental source of evidence of climate change, even though it's coming from different institutions using different methodology and measure. They all come to the same agreement: the planet is warming. And that consensus makes this data set one of the most trusted in climate science. And this data set has inspired countless visualization, line chart, anomaly map, bar chart, global projection. These visuals are designed to convince and to justify scientific conclusion, and they work really well for that. But often they stay quite academic and a bit dry, and that makes it harder to connect emotionally with people. And so the real challenge is how can we show the same data in a way that is both new and creative, that re-engage the public and make them care again about the subject. For example, you see those famous warming stripes from Ed Hawkins that use color for each year, and using this you can clearly translate the message that the temperature are rising. But there's been a few other things that I've seen around, a few visuals that are a bit more engaging in a way that is animated and transmits an idea that is more metaphoric, like the climate spiral that is basically animated and turned around, show the same kind of insight that this climate is evolving drastically, especially in the latest years. But it's also giving this impression that climate is spiraling out of control somehow. So it's give this extra emotion to it, which is what inspired the rest of the work that I'm going to present. So I took the same data set. It's a visual experiment that I've done. It's showing the global surface temperature anomalies over about a bit more than a century. It's basically showing all the data. It's the same one that you've seen, but instead of showing the average, it's basically showing all the different measurements and models that has been done around it. So I'll dig deeper into what this represents. So here the representation, all the bright spikes that you see here show positive anomalies, places in year that were warmer than average, and the dark dips represent negative anomaly. So basically places in years that were cooler than average. And of course, this is a bit exaggerated as a representation, but that makes the warming trends impossible to ignore in a way. It adds a bit of drama, but it's working to catch the attention of people. Also, I use an approach that is called small multiple. It's quite well known in the field of data visualization. It's basically split the data into smaller comparable units. Here the unit is time, a year time, and it lets you see both the global trend. You see that basically the trend is growing warmer, it's getting warmer. You see it with the color red intensified throughout the year, but it's also lets you see the local variation more clearly. And that's what I've done here. Basically, I created like this.
Again, thanks.
Yep, okay, thanks a lot. And so, yeah, this small multiple approach, I used it as well here. You basically, for every year, I represented the sphere that is showing the overall trend, where you see it's getting warmer and warmer. You see the brightest colors getting increasingly present throughout the years. And so lastly, what you can see here is this more of a metaphoric approach, where these visuals represent how the earth is burning somehow, with this red ball of fire somehow that is burning stronger and stronger. So, and sometimes metaphor says more than just precise charts, and it has to be used in comparison. It has to be use complementary, but it's transmitting this kind of feeling about the situation. And also the spinning, when I first published these visuals, made some people nauseous about the situation. They felt dizzy about the visuals, which is adding also a bit more of a feeling to the situation that is something is spinning out of control. So that was for the first case. I use this kind of approach for another topic about tornadoes. Here you see the number of tornadoes is rising. Yeah, so I've represented this rise of tornadoes is using this kind of 3D representation, where every year encode the amount of tornadoes for that given year. So it's an arc that I used for every year. The radius of the arc is proportional to the number of tornadoes during this year, and then the length of the arc is proportional to the average magnitude during this year. And so what you see there is that the number of tornadoes is increasing. Of course, I used like those line chart to also show it more in a more classical way. And I'll get to how I've come up with this idea looking at the data together. So basically, the more classical way and the more easy to understand is to just take a line chart, putting the x-axis as time, the y-axis as count, and then showing the amount of tornadoes per year in this way. And you'll see it's showing already the fact that the number is rising, but it's a bit boring, let's say. So what I had in mind looking at this data, I told myself, okay, maybe if you switch the axis, putting the time on the y-axis, just focusing on the time for now, and then just switching it 90 degrees, I looked at the data and told myself, maybe if you rotate it around, spinning the line around, you'll get something that's resemble somehow a tornado. So I told myself, okay, this is great. The data exactly match what I had in mind, and moreover, the data is actually sort of showing the image of the subject of the visual. So I thought it was quite funny to represent data about tornadoes as a tornado, which is kind of meta, but works well to grab the attention again. Of course, people, once you get the attention of people, they can deeper into the data sets, understand the issue and stuff like this. So that was for the second example. The third one I have in mind and I want to share with you it's something more relatable for people. It's basically what it feels like to live in a city throughout the year. So these visualizations show an average temperature. So yeah, here you basically see throughout the year the average temperature hourly. So again, going from midnight to noon up to the evening, and showing throughout the year how it's the temperature it's evolving. And basically it tells you with a clever labeling that's comfortable temperature where people enjoy living in the city is yellow here, and then everything that is redder and redder is too hot. Everything that is too blue is colder and almost freezing. And so you see Madrid is overall a great city to live in, because like throughout the day you feel nice and comfortable. But sometimes during the summer it's way too hot. So I really enjoy this chart. It's not from I haven't created this, but it's basically a great way to represent data, and you see a clear pattern to it. But for me, as a mathematician, I had some trouble with this, because there's like arbitrary discontinuity that cut the pattern that you see. For example, here at the end of the evening, you start the morning, and it's just the next hour, but you still jump here, and you lose this discontinuity. And that's the same thing with the year. Basically, the year is a circle somehow for me. So I looked at this and told myself, okay, maybe, I mean, in my topological mind, this for me was a donut. So basically, the day were going around, there's no more discontinuity, and then the year is going from January to December. You have this seasonality that you can capture somehow. And so this sort of only makes sense to me, but I pushed the idea further and made it as a visual. And of course, there's some drawbacks. Putting it as a donut doesn't enable you to see the two part of the day at the same time. So I started doing spinning, and I felt that this is quite nice. And then I made it, polishing it and made it more fun this way. Of course, it's solving this discontinuity issue in a kind of weird way, and introduce more difficulty to grasp the pattern. But end of the day, this grabbed a lot of attention of people. People enjoyed this, didn't exactly know what to think about it, but at least they get interested into the subject and cut this maybe sometimes what people call climate fatigue, because it's a novel way to represent the data. And it's fun and engaging. It doesn't need to be accurate. There's other stuff that have done it dozens of times where you can get the accurate measurement. So it's not the goal there. And also here, since I created the donut for each of the city, you could use the same kind of small multiple approach that I talked about earlier, where you can then here compare cities together and get a sense of where cities is super nice to live in, because it's comfortable throughout the full year, every time of the day, and then other where it's really like Montreal, where it's like 2 seasons, super cold, super hot, and you get a sense of how to read this in a fun and meaningful way. The last subject I want to talk about is this one. It's about the sea ice extent in the North Hemisphere. It's basically showing you the anomalies throughout the years. It's how Arctic sea ice has thinned over the last 40 years. It's basically showing you data in a strange way, and I'll get to why I've done it this way later on. But basically what you're looking at here is every square that you see is well, let's say every column that you see is a complete year, showing every month one by one, and every square then is a past month of a given year. So this is like July in 2006, and it's represented by 10 by 10 square. And the idea is that if a given month is below what is considered normal, 10% less CIs than average, then you get 10 dots missing. So this represents 10% of the overall dots. So there's 100 dots. This represents the average. If for a given month you get to an amount of CIs that is just the right amount, you get it fully covered. If it's above the average, you get it with accent point there. It's just, I think, lost. Get it back. And so, yeah, so if the month is below...
Sorry, we lost you again.
I don't know what's going on.
Now you're back.
Okay.
You can see your screen, yeah.
And so, yeah, I was saying if you're below, it's basically a representation. If you get it in your head, you can imagine like the coverage of the ice on the Arctic. It's basically there's like dots missing, and so if it's not as usual, you get like a hole and patch in the sea ice, and that's represented this way. And so what you see here is the tendency, how things have evolved. And like in 2012-13, you get there's lots of ice missing somehow. It used to be much more than that, and there's like almost 50% below the average that is showing. So basically, why did I show this way? It's basically because together with an excellent graphics designer called Julie Brunet, also called Data Citron, she asked me, do we want to do a collaboration together? I have this idea about using a machine called Singer. It's a knitting machine that allows you to encode some information. I mean, that was it. Our intention is to just use this machine to encode data. And so she asked me, do you have any idea about what we could do? And here are the constraints the machine imposed to how we can encode the data. And so this was really interesting for me, because I started looking at how to do stuff, and we come up with this idea about CI extend and how to represent it using all in the thing. So this representation that is quite original and somehow is a strange way to deal about it, made it feasible for the machine to implement. At the end of the day, she started over using her own end and making the dots a physicalization of the data herself. And I got inspired to do the same kind of approach in a different kind of format as well. I wanted to do data physicalization with ceramic, and so I used this this representation to make all in a vase, and it's still a work in progress. But you get the idea about. I'm almost done. You get the idea about how we could trigger interest from people that have no insight about what data is and how to deal about it. So I guess I'm done. Just 3 takeaways: build on trusty data, balance science and emotion, and dare to experiment, because that's how creativity would help to fight climate fatigue. Here you go. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about this, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions.
Thank you so much, Karim. Really, we have already seen a lot of our participants reacting to your visualizations. We will have time also to further discuss during our Q&A session. I will ask also Renato to join. Perfect. We have both of you here. Let's dive in already in the questions. Maybe we can start with you, Renato. We have selected some of the questions. One of the more interesting ones that we have seen is relating the data caps between countries. The question we received was, how do you deal with data caps from countries that aren't sharing or participating in climate data initiatives?
Thank you so much. This is a great question. We have made, I'm going to double check all the links that I share because I read in the chat that some of them may not be working well. So then I'm going to recheck and send it. And I'm also going to share some research that I couldn't because of the time today. But what we have seen is we are a global civil society organization, a small one with limited resources. So we try to do a lot of advocacy, but sometimes it's complicated. But we have made some research and we have seen that actually most of the countries are part of the Paris Agreement. So they really do the effort of collecting data and reporting for the Paris Agreement. But the thing is that not always that data is open in open formats, and sometimes it's not even. Sometimes it's not even in the government's websites. I mean, they do the PDF that they report to the Paris Agreement, and it goes to the UN repository, and you can't even find that data in the government's websites. So I think that in different ways. I mean, sometimes with not great standards, but I think that most countries are doing that effort of collecting the information and reporting it. But I think there's some locked value there because they do that effort, and then we can really help them to publish that in open data so that it can have a wider impact in different sectors of the society. And also, while they are reporting but with not clear standards, I think that's a huge challenge. And I couldn't mention all the learnings, but one is that it's really difficult sometimes to make comparisons when there's not a common standard globally, but not even regionally. I mean, in Latin America, it's really, even with the Escazú agreement, it's really difficult to make comparisons between different countries. So I don't have a clear answer because I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you, Renato. And maybe to further discuss on this point, you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges is the common standards. We received another question on this aspect. Maybe you can share some other biggest, institutional or political barriers you see for governments in publishing high-value climate data sets, and maybe any suggestions of how to overcome it.
Yeah, I think I can mention. There are a lot. I'm going to choose two or three, mainly, but I think that we can divide it maybe in institutional barriers and also political barriers. But some institutional barriers that we found, and I mention it a lot because I think this is one of the most challenging one, is the fragmented data governance. Inside the government, there are a lot of agencies producing the information, and the information sometimes is really siloed and not connected. I'm not even talking about opening it, but also they are not really sharing internally in the government. So I think that a solution, it's hard, but something that we need to work on is a clear interagency data governance structures and data governance documents, so we really understand who the data stewardship and some shared technical standards internally first, and then if we can make it at least regionally, at least in Latin America, it would be great. Sometimes we also find some lack of sustained institutional capacity. I mean, open data, we have seen that in some governments, open data is sometimes or a small office or short-term projects, or sometimes it hasn't got a strong budget, and it depends on donor funding. So I think that incorporating open data responsibilities in different job descriptions or public officers, and also allocate sufficient resources to that can help us to overcome that barrier. And one last one is I would mention is sometimes there's low political prioritization on these topics. Uh, Sometimes open data is seen more like a tool, a technical issue rather than a strategic one. And I think that one good strategy I can think about is connecting the data publication to really visible national priorities like green jobs, citizen engagement, how to address disaster resilience. Like this was connected with what I was saying, like opening the information by default with dialogue with privacy, but also with a clear purpose.
Thank you, Renato, for touching on this point. I honestly, that was many questions were touching about these pods, about the data caps, about the barriers that you might have in terms of governments, or in terms also of the open data communities. And maybe you could elaborate about the relationship between climate action and the open data communities, and maybe how you will envision that this will be further enhanced in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I don't know if it happens globally, but that's something that we found when we start our projects, our implementations. I mean, I want to clarify the open up guides are published in our website and are free and accessible to everyone. But the projects I'm telling to are concrete implementations that we have done due to have the correct resources from international cooperation or for philanthropic organizations. So the guide can be used by anyone, but these are like concrete projects with funding that we did. And when we do that and we start with the diagnosis and the prioritization workshops with different stakeholders, we found that sometimes the organizations working on open data or transparency weren't even in contact with the ones working on climate change and environment, uh, and it was really difficult sometimes for people that are not working with these instruments like the Paris Agreement or the Escazú Agreement to understand all the technical knowledge and all the technical data that these instruments are prescribing. So we found in our experience that we needed to push and work better on that connection. And we did, and I'm also going to share it, we did a super short report with the help of Luminate, doing interviews with different members of open data communities, organization, and also with climate change organization. It's called Opportunities for Focused Collaboration, and it shows some ideas that I can share with you, but some general ones. When we were thinking on possible contributions of open data in the climate action agenda, they mainly talk about increasing access to reliable climate data and data governance, generating more citizen-friendly information for advocacy efforts. That I think is really related to the topic today, and it's a great example are all the initiatives that Karim shared. And also trying to they mentioned that open data could really help in trying to bring new voices into the climate action conversation. But I'm going to share this report too with you, so then you can share with the audience.
Perfect. We will make sure to include it. And maybe last question for you, Renato, for now, and then we will jump on Karim's questions. Very interesting one about what are your thoughts on making people adopt standards in order to move towards open data? You touched upon it a bit during your last answer, but maybe you could further elaborate on this.
Yeah, what I can say about that is that, for example, Open Data Charter does not create the standards. When we work in the different open up guides, what we do is we start doing a benchmarking and understand the different regulations and different standards that are already proposed. And we do a benchmarking with the key data sets that we think that should be open on the topic, and then we suggest different standards. So it's more a suggestion, and it's more like there's a lot of things to do because it's really difficult, still in a regional way and in a global way, but it's more a suggestion, and we try to, as I was saying, we try to adapt it to each context. But of course that we need to work on standards, because if not, then I think that the main problem is that the information is not going to be comparable and interoperable between, as I was saying, between different countries, between different also local governments in the countries, but also between the different agencies inside the government.
Thank you, Renato. And now we're jumping into Karim's questions. There was a huge discussion on the different ways you are visualizing. So nice comments received. We had also some questions regarding how you're balancing simplicity and accuracy when turning this complex climate data into visual stories. Maybe you can share some insights with our participants.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's not easy to combine to make something simple that tells the full story. It takes a lot of trial and error. I mean, it's always like I mean, it's our job as a data scientist to do this kind of stuff for a bunch of other subjects. It's no difference from the classical work of data science. It's basically tell a story with data, just extract the insight out of it, and then communicate about those insights in a clear way. Visualization is for me a great way to do so. That's why I advise to do it. It's not easy to make it more original and at the same time easy to understand. It's thing that took years for me to develop. So there's no magical recipe to do so, but it's just you really need to try to put yourself in the shoes of a given person that have no background into the subject you're trying to introduce, no background into the analytical aspect of things. So it has to be simple to understand, and just sometimes just putting yourself in the shoes of those people that's gonna end up looking at your visuals or your analysis is the best way to convey the ideas clearly.
Thank you, Karim. And on this aspect of simplicity that you mentioned, we received some questions. How reusable are the graphics that you have presented? Like, is there a specific GitHub repository where you share the code base?
I share a lot of the code that I do. Often, if you follow me on the social media, I often post a link to the code. Not only the code, I can maybe show you quickly if that's all right with you.
Yeah. You can.
If it's so, basically the thing that I've worked on the CI knitting project where I show this, it's basically something where I explain the methodology or I've obtained the data. This is not shared, and but it's something that I often do. It's like point out to this, where it's a notebook. It's called Observable. It's basically showing you the code. You can even tweak it, and I disappear again.
No worries. Maybe you can share it later. I don't know if it's possible. Maybe you can share this link. We can share it also with the participants.
Sure. I mean, this one is I'll share it later, but
Okay.
the others I'll put the link. The idea is that I think it's part of the philosophy. You need to be transparent about how you build a chart, how you aggregate the data, and the only way is to show your source, show your code, and I share this easily with everyone. I also saw that I forgot a month in the presentation. It's actually not forgotten. I just forgot to put the label to it. As you've seen in the visuals, it's there in the data. The representation is there. It's just I rewrote the label and I made a mistake forgetting.
No worries, no worries. We love speakers. Our participants, they have attention to detail.
Yeah.
Maybe a last question. I know we are 2 minutes over time, but I would like to share a last question that both of you can answer, because you are touching two completely different aspects on the topic of climate action. And I wanted to ask you, in the future, how can stronger collaboration between data scientists like you, Karim, and storytellers and data publishers like Renato's work help turn climate data into meaningful impact? I don't know which one of you would like to join. It's a bit philosophical, but if you have some insights, it will be nice to hear your thoughts.
I can jump in. I think that there's a connection that we really explore, and I'm more from a policy background and legal background, but we usually work with data scientists and data visualizers. But I think it's really necessary, because I think it's the most challenging part of the openness process. It's always to measure the impact of what's happening with the openness, and to really understand how it can be usable and how it can be interesting for citizenship, and to generate a feedback loop between the government and also the citizens.
Yeah, and on my side, I have no good idea about how to improve relation. I mean, for me, it's been always quite open. I reach out to people that publish a data set. I show them what I do. They're quite excited about it, and they're always open. So for me, it's been really nice. Sometimes for larger open source data platform, it's harder to find people behind the data set and stuff like this. So often you would want like a different format or stuff like this. The advice that I can give for those big platforms is always to put the most amount of data at the lowest level granularity. Sorry, because it's for a certain type of person like me. It's really good to have a way to reconstruct the aggregation themselves, which is part of how we can come up with other ideas that weren't thought about before. So yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you both for your time today. Thank you also to everyone and each one of you for staying here a bit more. We would like to close maybe sharing with you our upcoming activities. So we will have our next webinar on 28th of November on the data union strategy. So feel free to already register for this. And then we encourage you to continue the discussion, because I have seen all of you being very talkative, coming with a lot of ideas in our chat. Why not continue our discussion on the collaboration channel that we have on the European Data Portal? We expect to see you there. And once again, thank you very much, Karim. Thank you very much, Renato, for your work on this truly important topic for all of us. And wishing you all a nice weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.